what happened in Kolkata last year. Again,
Yeah,
I
the
think
medical
around that there were
student,
so many other incidents around sexual harassment, around rape, and a lot of other things not getting the coverage, or coming into the mind, which also talks about like that solidarity, even among different communities or people as well, wherein you're turning up for certain cause or for certain things, but for in other spaces you're not,
right? And who's that solidarity serving? Am I feeling better about myself? Right? And is that my purpose? And nobody's saying don't feel great. Huge advocate. Feel great about yourself, right? But what are you feeling great about yourself about, right? What topic is making into your coffee break conversations, hai na? And I remember exactly, thanks for bringing that up, right? And again, by not at all am I trying to say that, what had happened was okay, or that it shouldn't be spoken about, or that loss is not real. That loss is real. It's unfortunate what happened. It is really, really hard to, sit with something like that, right? And all through this, I'm trying to say is that, like, why is something else not being spoken about, right? Why are certain lives more important? Why are other lives not important, right? Why is something that is happening in a village in UP done by upper caste people not being spoken about, right? What is the resistance? What is it that makes us look at rape as violence and not at manual scavenging as violence? What is so inherently embedded and structured in us to do that, right? And why is it that we're talking about only certain lives? If everybody is important, everybody is not equally important, right? So yeah, and then the idea of when you were talking about triple talaq and you're talking about decriminalization, what are some of the undertones in those documents and those discussions is what is really important. Who's coming out and saying what, who's presenting, who's the face of what, right? Is, I think, also really, really important. It is very easy for upper caste women to talk about why hijab shouldn't exist. Yeah. But, I don't come from a community. I am it's so easy to be like, no, yeah, that is regressive, right? Or for an upper caste man, I don't think upper caste man should speak. No.
Fair enough. Yeah.
No, but I don't think that. I actually think they should speak. I think they should recognize their own privilege. Yeah, I think that is really, really important. But yeah, it's so easy to be outside of the community and talk about what I think is wrong with something else. Oh my God, this exists in that community as well. Okay, but what exists in yours, right? And I truly do believe as a human being, I do think, sure, having theory really helps, right? I do come from an academic background, so I do think theory has a lot of, and I read a lot, so I do think theory adds a lot of value, but I also have to experience. And if I don't have that experience, I must shut up and listen. That is the first and the most important thing, I think, in feminism.
I think while we were talking about all these incidents, I think that idea or a culture of victim blaming also emerges in these spaces, right? Where someone's place, clothing, situation, identity, and a lot of other factors become the centerpiece versus assigning the blame to the perpetrator, and which I think comes from this, how patriarchy is imagined and how it is there as well, right? So how do you see that playing out more and more, and how do you kind of break out of that essentially?
I think with violence, I think one thing is, and I can again talk about myself, and everything that I've been saying is not so much about the other as it is about myself.
Of course. And you can always you can only talk about yourself at the end of the day.
But I also have to reiterate that because I think as humans, including myself, I have the ability to look at myself and make it about me. But everything that I've said today and everything that I'm going to say is all about my opinion and my experiences and how I view things. So I think also with violence, I think most of us, or again, going back to me, have been a perpetrator, victim, and have witnessed violence, right? And maybe not realizing that I'm perpetrating it, not realizing that I'm a victim or surviving it, and also not realizing that what I'm witnessing is violence, at a very personal level, because a lot of times there are other experiences, right? Violence is not an absolute emotion or an experience, and nor is love, right? So unfortunately, a lot of times, a lot of experiences in life have these contradictory emotions and experiences that have overlapped. And contradiction is okay. I'm okay with being a contradiction, you know. So I do think that, so one would be to reflect, and I do think that, ये महायोगी टाइप के जो लोग आ जाते हैं, right? And not only yogi, but ये कब की बात है, मुझे तो कौन सा मिनिस्टर ने क्या बोल दिया था कि नूडल्स नहीं, चाउमीन, सॉरी, करेक्ट वर्ड, खाते हैं जो युवा, वो ऐसे लड़कियों को देख के एक्साइट हो जाते हैं, या जो लड़कियां ये कपड़े पहनती हैं उनको ये कपड़े नहीं पहनने चाहिए थे, या फिर लाइक ओ व्हाट वाज शी डूइंग एट दैट आवर, राइट? Like, and how, even if you're not saying that out loud, how that's your first thought,
reaction,
right? Imagine how much of that is in your subconscious, right? And I do think, right, like I do think a lot of us, so interesting fact, can be challenged, but a lot of who we are, like 95% of who we are is our subconscious, right? And our subconscious gets framed in very early years. So imagine being a child and hearing things like that, or absorbing things like that, or seeing things like that, to actually have like, it's the same thing, right? When I wake up in the morning or I'm going to bed at night, there are thoughts that are constantly playing in my head. Those thoughts are not things that I consciously want to think about, right? So that's my subconscious playing in my head, right? So how many of these things, right, like you inherently believe, right? You inherently think that this is what it is, So yeah, like where is that coming from? कि उसने क्या पहना था? What does that have to do with anything? Are we trying to say that babies are not getting raped, right? That girls as young as 2 years old are getting raped, that women as old as 93-year-old are getting raped, right? Trans people are getting harassed for stepping out of their house if they're not getting harassed by being inside their house enough, right? Like, can't even imagine what a life to live. And again, don't want to talk about certain identities and certain communities only in, violence, right? Because there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of love in the community, right? So I do want to talk about that. But there's a lot of love in being a woman, right? I embrace it, I love it. But like, just to talk about how there are questions around that, and what is it that makes it so easy for us and so important to ask that, right? And why are we listening to people who are asking these questions, right? What was she wearing? So irrelevant. Where did it happen? So irrelevant. Why is it not who did it? And there are lots of things around it. Yeah. So maybe just that.